Welcome. About a month ago, I was heading to Costa Rica. Tara and I were going to be doing some teaching and then taking some time to explore and adventure. It's kind of part of a new phase of our lives. What would it be like to hang out and adventure for 3 weeks? It's kind of the question. Never really done anything like this for a really, really long time. I've always had a project, something I was working on, something I was anxious about getting done. And of course, COVID, wow, what a game changer. Definitely stepping back, live teaching not happening. So this was a real opportunity to kind of explore, well, what would life be like to, do some intense teaching. We're leading a very intensive retreat, and then really take some time to be challenging for both of us. We're kind of both type A yogis. So I worked really, really hard for many, many weeks to clear the decks. I had to kind of set up all the Dharma talks for the month and set up everything that would be taken care of for 3 weeks. And I wasn't even sure I could get it all done, but I really focused. So as I was getting everything ready the day before we were going to leave, just kind of going through my checklist, I got out my passport. And I found out that my passport had expired. Went through all the classic stages of death. First, denial. I simply did not believe what I was reading on my passport. That's not possible. That would be expired. And then anger at myself. What an idiot. And then bargaining. Maybe I'll just show up and act surprised. Maybe I could just flash it really fast and they won't notice the date. And then finally, self-recrimination. Just anger toward myself, embarrassment, just shame. This was the night before we were going to leave. So then this initiated the scramble, and Tara, God bless her, she got right to work. I would need a new passport right away, like today. So we started Googling for options, and the only solution was to find a passport office that could do a turnaround. Truly next to impossible. She talked to someone in the government, fully booked, weeks and months ahead of people getting their passports renewed. And then she found someone who said, well, there are only 2 places that would be possible in the entire United States: Buffalo, New York, and San Juan, Puerto Rico. The Buffalo appointment was going to be too late for me, so it was San Juan. So I had put some clothes aside, but the evening I had reserved for packing. And I had basically, let's see, how long did I have? No time to pack before I had to head to the airport. Because the first thing I had to do was to print out this special form for my new passport, where everything on that form had to be perfect or it wasn't going to happen. So it was one of those super tedious and really detailed forms with intense time pressure. I had to go through it multiple times. Each time I found another error. I went through it again with Tara. We found another error. Finally, got it done, and the fastest packing job I've ever done in my life. I had to fly from DC to Newark, and then a short layover before my flight to San Juan, and I'd get in late that night. And then the next morning, I had an appointment at the U.S. Passport Office in San Juan at 11:30 a.m., and my job was to get to San Juan, find a place for passport photos, get to the passport office, show them my flight for 5:15 p.m. the same day, and pray that they would hand me my passport in time to get back to the airport. I would fly back to Newark, get in late that night, find a hotel, get up at 4:30 a.m., fly out that morning to make it to the conference center in Costa Rica. If they couldn't do it in that time frame or anything got messed up, I would have to either cancel or not show up for those flights and find another way to get down there and basically show up late for this conference. So how was I feeling about this? I think it's safe to say I was not trusting the universe was going to support me. fact, I was kind of sick with anxiety. There were so many things that could go wrong and really mess things up. There's 70 people coming to this retreat, and it was on me. I totally screwed up. But a couple little glimmers in here. And the big one was my co-presenter, Jake Tarr, shared with me how he had done the same thing on a family vacation. So he was very kind and very empathetic, and it helped. But it still didn't take away the self-recrimination. So this is the setup. Now, I had been reading and listening to a book by Pema Chodron called How We Live is How We Die. It's a fantastic book. Highly recommend it. And it set up some very interesting practices, which I thought I might share with you here, because I got to practice. Many, many hours of practice, intensive practice, sitting in an airline seat. Just like death, one moment I went from this really great story about our comfortable travels together, where everything was set up. The air travel was set up, the ride to the conference center was set up, reservations were made for our travels, reservations were made for our adventures afterward. From that to racing into the void, into something I never would have imagined I would ever do. And so, boom, I'm on my own. All the connections, all the way through to San Juan and back, were not guaranteed. There was a high percentage of failure all the way along. One little mess up and it would throw everything off. So I've always traveled alone, and in the past, I've loved it. You know, traveling alone, there's this heightened self-awareness. It's just designed for spontaneity. And in Europe, when I was wandering around in my 20s, I remember thinking, why would I ever travel with another person? So many adventures would open up in front of me. But here, I was traveling alone. Well, not exactly. I was traveling with my mind, which was on fire. But because of the book and the practices I was doing, I really kind of tapped into this metaphor of how traveling anywhere is very much like traveling through this lifetime in this body and remembering that dying is in my future. So with this preamble, I'd like to talk about 4 things. The first is the 2 selves that make up who you are. The second is the awareness of this never-ending quest for control. The third is the art of making friends with fear. And the fourth, to talk a little bit about what is it that dies and what is it that lives. I've been meditating consistently since I was 15. I mean, consistently meaning on a regular basis. And, you know, I have learned so much about myself and about life. Looking closer at the teachings, some like the core essential teachings, there's some very interesting teachings about reincarnation in the Buddhist tradition. Do I believe in reincarnation? Where I end up is whether it's true or not, I would like to be as present as I can be for whatever happens when my body falls away. You may be very familiar or somewhat familiar or not at all familiar with the 3 characteristics of reality which inform every moment and become more aware through a meditation practice. The first being anicca, or the fact of impermanence, that everything that has comes out of any condition is going to change. The second is dukkha, which is about the stress that we encounter in life in relationship to what's changing. The unsteadiness of mind, the unsatisfactoriness because of change. And the third is about anatta, about this principle of not self. That one catches a lot of people. What does that mean, not self? One of the key operative phrases that I come back to, or teachings, is this one: nothing whatsoever is to be clung to as I or mine. Nothing whatsoever is to be clung to as I or mine. And if you think about it, the moments when that sense of I and mine fall away are usually like the peak experiences in our lives, where we open to flow, where we sense the mystery, where we merge with whatever it is we're engaged in. And so at times, I have really kind of gotten that sense of I and mine fall away, and there's something much more vast that is actually tangible, that I can experience. And it really points to this whole sense of what we could call the two selves. There's one self, the who you are as one self is you're born into your physical body. The language that you heard as a child and formed how you conceptualize life, the language that you learned how to speak, the nature and the quality of your primary caretakers and how they influenced you, the influence of your siblings, if you had them, your socioeconomic conditions, your schooling, your friends, your work, all of the conditions that form this sense of you. That's one self. The other self you can think of as awareness itself, the witness, aware of coming into a body, the awareness of the formation of language, the awareness of the initial imprints of your caretaker and family, and the experience through your life of getting lost in the drama, and then occasionally coming back to that sense of awareness itself. You know, the 6-year-old you brushing your teeth, looking into the mirror, as compared to you brushing your teeth now, lots has changed. But has awareness itself changed? That's the question. So the relative self experiences life through the nervous system. I am this body, I am these feelings, I am these emotions, I am these thoughts. I am these states of consciousness. I am the one who's making my life happen. And while that's true, there's more. Because we think that we're a wave and we forget that we're the ocean. So this relative self, the conditioned self, also has this quality, what we could call the absolute self. That you are the sky that contains everything. You are the ocean that contains every single wave. So it's one thing to be anxious. It's another thing to be aware of your anxiety. And I got to see my anxiety on my travels. You know, I've told a little joke about ADD, and the ADHD. One definition of ADHD is attention deficit high definition. If you really pay attention, you really see it in high definition. And that's what I got to do. I got to really see my anxiety, but it also, something in the watching of the anxiety helped to release me. So to my trip, first to Newark. I was in the middle seat, of course, because it was late. I was sitting next to a really big dude, of course. The flight was delayed, of course. And when we arrived in Newark, we sat at the gate for a long time. A really long time, of course. Waiting at the gate, it seemed like an hour, but it was actually only like 57 minutes. I got a text notice that the plane to San Juan was boarding. Boom, anxiety. And because my flight was overbooked and I was in row 4, and I think I was like boarding group 5, there wasn't anywhere to stash my carry-on. So I had to stash my carry-on 6 rows back, which means that when it was time to disembark, I would have to force my way back against the stream of people wanting out to get my bag. I couldn't afford to wait until the plane had emptied out. So of course I had anxiety about that. And I did it, apologizing profusely as I waited back to get my bag. And then I made it to my next flight. Thank God it was kind of nearby. The next flight that was already boarding, which of course was delayed for hours. So then, now on the plane, waiting to taxi, we sat there for about half an hour, and then we were told that the wind had changed direction. So the planes were now taking off in a different direction. And our plane was number 31 out of 40. So I had an aisle seat on this flight, and there was a huge, massive guy at the window who was, of course, forcing the middle guy into my space, which gave me some other material to work on. And about 4 hours late, we landed in San Juan. Mercifully, Tara had booked me into a hotel at the airport. And this was about 11:30 when we touched down. I go to bed at 8:30, so I was a little bit confused and groggy, but I did make it to my hotel room, or I should say the walk-in freezer with a bed. It's about 4 degrees below freezing. And because I was headed to the equator, all I was wearing was just a light sweater. I brought along a light raincoat, but no socks or anything like that. So I tried the thermostat setting. Nothing happened. I thought, well, at least I can take a hot shower. Nope. The water was warm enough to get into, but not warm enough to stay in. So I was actually in bed shivering, knowing I had to get up and find my way to a passport photo place, then to a government office, then plead my case, then get back in time to fly back to Newark. I got a text somewhere in there from Tara saying that the office in San Juan might be slow, so better to get there when they open. So I was going to bed now knowing I would get about 3 hours of sleep. So what was my practice? The practice was about watching my reactivity, noting the play of the 3 kleshas. Whenever the mind goes off, it's going to go off in one of 3 directions. It's either going to go into anger, aversion, blame, and judgment, or it's going to go into craving and wanting and planning, or it's going to go into delusion, believing things that are true when they're not. So what was so interesting about this was I got to watch. In Vipassana, we talk about Vedana. Vedana is the feeling tone of your body. And again, it's the feeling tone is either going to be pleasant, something you're going to want to cultivate, or unpleasant, something you're going to want to nuke or move away from, or something neutral, neither pleasant nor unpleasant. I got to sit and watch my mind. And as I watched my mind, I got to see stories that would create that were delusional, anticipating things that were going to happen. I had no proof they were going to happen. And getting lost in anxiety and worry and all of that. Now, it's one thing just to notice. It's another thing to actually engage. So when I would feel those waves of anxiety really strong, I would actually turn to really examine them. Where exactly do I feel it? And I began to recognize how old these feelings of anxiety were. This just desire to control. My patterns of anxiety as a young child were all about trying to anticipate the worst that could possibly happen so I wouldn't be surprised if it did happen. Pretty messed up strategy for a kid. But It came from a very young place of wanting some control, wanting some assurance in life. Never really shook it. But I really got a deeper understanding of befriending anxiety, befriending it as a companion. So this becomes not only an essential part of navigating through life, but it's actually a very essential part of navigating through death, which I'll get to, assuming I have enough time. If you close your eyes just now, just for a few moments, just take a moment and explore the following reflections. On the inside right now, can you locate anything that you would call pleasant? And can you sense, perhaps in your own way, this sense of like moving toward the pleasant? Is there anything now on the inside that you can identify as unpleasant? And here you might notice the natural desire of the mind to move away. And you might sense now, can you locate anywhere inside that feels neutral? It's not unpleasant, not pleasant, but that in-between space. And what is the quality of mind as you identify neutral? This can be an incredible way of practicing. Just to simply notice the rise and fall of pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral on the inside as the body registers it. And what you may notice is arising out of this whole field of sensation and feeling will come thoughts and beliefs and habits and character, and in a true sense, your destiny. How you react to that feeling tone impacts the rest of your life and your future. So if you like, you can open your eyes if you haven't already. Like many things, this practice is extraordinarily simple and extraordinarily revealing. We are nothing more than reaction machines without full awareness. We react, and then we set in motion a whole other set of circumstances. We're fully identified with our reactions because we are that relative self, trying to control life so it fits our narrative. But what happens when you're not identified with a reaction? When you're just aware of the reaction? When you're the one who is aware? Well, a few things. Number one, you begin to recognize patterns of reaction. All the patterns of your conditioning. You begin to see it more and more clearly. And you might sense the possibility of freedom, your capacity to choose, your capacity to move from reaction to creation. And for me, it was very interesting in my travels. As many times as I was aware of the clench of anxiety, that many times I could possibly come back and relax and open to the moment again. I've come to understand more and more around my relative self, or the conditioned self, and what Pema Chodron calls propensity. I'm very aware in my conditioning that I am anxiety waiting to happen. And I got to watch my mind. What do I do if I miss this next plane? How do I get a passport photo? Does Puerto Rico have Uber? What if I get lost trying to find someone in the office in a massing complex for the passport office. How am I going to find anything plant-based to eat in Puerto Rico? How should I plead my case at the passport office? Should I be charming and kind? Should I be obsequious? Should I be aggressive? I had so many opportunities to worry because I didn't know if I would make my next flight. I didn't know how to get to my hotel. I didn't know where the passport place was. I didn't know if Uber existed. I didn't know how to get to the passport place. I didn't know if I'd have to find housing that night and cancel my flights and rebook them. I was anxious, but through my practice, I knew I was anxious. And I began to come to understand yet again another big distinction in my life. What I have control over and what I don't have control over. And then a breakthrough occurred. I realized there was something I could do. I could ask for help along the way. So I started to make a list of all the experiences of kindness that I had along the way. Gratitude, of course, is a tremendous shift in consciousness. But as I made this list, I began to recognize that God bless Tara, who immediately started researching on how we were going to fix the situation. Jake, who commiserated, letting me know he'd done the same thing. A very helpful person at the passport office who helped to nail down the appointment and lock it in for me and offer some advice. Tara, who booked the flights and the hotel as I was on my way. The people on the plane who let me wade back a few rows to get my bag. One guy was not happy, but still he let me. A guy at the San Juan airport hotel who tried to be helpful. The passport photo guy who, when his camera kept failing, kept trying rather than giving up to get me my passport photos. The Uber driver who was friendly and chatty and got me exactly where I needed to go. A kind man I stopped who pointed out the office building I needed to get to and told me that it was on the 9th floor. Because I got there early, the security guard who moved my appointment from 10:30 to 9. The policeman who reviewed my documents and told me how I could expedite the process. The passport official who was kind and understanding. And when the time for me to pick up my passport passed by many, many hours, and it looked like I wasn't going to get my passport that same day, another traveler and I got into a conversation and we talked on strategies on finding hotels and how to cancel flights. And Jake, who sent me text on other flights I could use. And the security guy who kind of let me go through without unpacking all my bags. The guy at the desk who, when he told me my passport was ready, had a big smile on his face. And when I got back to the airport by 5:15, and when I got back to Newark, I couldn't find the airport shuttle I needed. I wandered and circled and wandered and circled, and a guy at the desk helped to get me figure that out. And at the shuttle waiting point, it's 38 degrees and windy. All I was wearing was just this light shirt, no socks. And a pilot who was heading to the hotel, the same hotel, saw how freezing I was, and he called to see when the shuttle was coming. And as I was doing deep knee bends to stay warm, he and his co-pilot were really sympathetic. It's a very interesting, it was a fascinating experience for me. Because what I got to see is when I go into fear, I get small. It becomes me against the world. When I come into the here and now, and I can recognize and name what I'm feeling, the possibility of asking for help, recognizing what do I not have control over, asking for help. What a difference. So you might take a moment. You can close your eyes. Take 3 breaths. And you might bring into mind, what makes you the most anxious right now in your life? Just take a moment to name it. If you can, take a moment to sense if you can locate how that lives in your nervous system. You might feel where you feel tight. And explore the following questions. First question is, what do you actually have control over? What if you asked for help and you got some help? What would that be like? What would that feel like? And what if you held this sense of anxiety with some kind of kindness or compassion? How does that shift? How does that move? If you like, you can deepen your breath. And if you like, you can open your eyes. We each have our particular propensities. Some of us are anger waiting to happen. Some of us are depression waiting to happen. Some of us are rejection waiting to happen. Mindfulness helps us to understand our own natural propensities, our own natural dispositions. And again, as I said, as someone who's drawn toward anxiety, it becomes this inner world of it's me against the world. I have to figure this out by myself, and getting small. If I can't meet that with awareness and with compassion, it's not going to shift. When I can meet it with some element of awareness, to be able to name it, to recognize it, to bring some empathy, some compassion to it, and then that risk of asking for help. It's a new world. New world. So the bad news is that your conditioned life is filled with likes and dislikes. And for the average person, your list of your likes and dislikes gets longer as you get older. You may have noticed how some really old folks have very, very narrow windows of comfort. The good news is that there's another you that is not conditioned, that you can, from time to time, access with awareness where you're bound and how you might get more free. And in that same way, one of the punchlines of Pema's book, of How We Live is How We Die, is that when you die, you may well encounter all of your propensities, all of your conditioning, and it probably makes sense to start on that now. Start unwinding that now. So it's an interesting question as to what does it mean to have a good death? A bardo is kind of a state of existence between death and rebirth, and it varies in length according to your past actions. A bardo can also be seen as consciousness of the deceased moving through confusion. That state of confusion appears real, but with awareness you begin to recognize the confusion. Again, you don't have to believe in reincarnation. An example is anger. When you're angry, it appears real. You're totally identified, but something might change. And it changes as you become aware of it, to name it, and then to sense if you can hold it with some element of compassion or kindness. When you hold on and you don't let go, you are gripped and caught. When you let go a little, as the saying goes, you can experience a little bit of freedom. If you let go a lot of freedom, and hypothetically let go completely, and complete freedom. And in essence, that is our practice. So when we begin to explore our death, it opens up this process of unwinding our conditioning, unwinding our karma. And I think of this just unpeeling an onion. You keep relaxing and paying attention. You recognize that hyper-vigilant conditioned self who's constantly seeking to force the world to its point of view. And if you pay attention through mindfulness, you will begin to notice the patterns of your conditioning. How the relative self or the conditioned self is nothing more than the product of conditioning. And when you become aware of the one who is aware, game changer. And so it's about remembering impermanence. And in many ways, these practices of reflecting on death are brutal. But, oh gosh, who was it that said, there was some statement said that in order to be happy, reflect on your death 5 times a day. Seems so counterintuitive. And yet, when you remember that everyone you know will die in no particular order, when you remember that everything you hold dear in this life is going to vanish and disappear, when you remember karma, how you're the product of your conditioning, how you're informed by your conditioning, and how everything that you do creates your future, something begins to open up inside. New possibilities begin to emerge. So in my journey through fear and anxiety and anticipating everything that could go wrong, on getting only 4 hours sleep, I got my passport. And I got down to Costa Rica a day late, and everything went really, really well. And I kind of fell in the trap of, oh, everything's really good, now I can relax, which is true. But of course, even on the rest of my travels, there are ups and downs. And in the ups and downs of life, we need to keep remembering that who we are is just the two selves. The conditioned self that is fully identified with the body and the nervous system and the senses, and the one who is aware. So I'd like to share a reading called No Path by David White. And we'll close with a short meditation. If you like, you can close your eyes. There is no path that goes all the way. Not that it stops us looking for the full continuation. The one line in the poem we can start and follow straight to the end. The fixed belief we can hold, facing a stranger that saves us the trouble of a real conversation. But one day you are not just imagining an empty chair where your loved one sat. You are not just telling a story where the bridge is down and there's nowhere to cross. You are not just trying to pray to a God you imagine would keep you safe. No, you've come to the place where nothing you've done will impress, and nothing you can promise will avert the silent confrontation. The place where your body already seems to know the way, having kept to the last its own secret reconnaissance. But still, there is no path that goes all the way. In these final minutes, you might again take 3 slow, deep breaths. These bardo states, if you will, are states of consciousness that appear real. But with awareness and with an awakened heart, we can see more clearly into the true nature of who and what we really are. Taking some time to reflect on the reality of impermanence. This next exhalation, a dying away to that which was. This incoming inhalation, born into a new movement, a new moment. This body destined at some point to drop away. Reflecting on the reality of stress and suffering. Believing what is real is not real, or believing what is real isn't real. And reflecting on these two selves, who you are as this being of pure conditioning, seeing and experiencing through the senses, experiencing life as a wave separate from the ocean. And sensing now, if you will, who you are as the ocean itself. Holding, containing everything that moves and changes. Sensing who you are as the sky, with all the weather systems that take form and change. As the space that can hold and contain everything. As you're ready, you can gently deepen your breath. As you're ready, you can let your eyes open. And welcome back. So my travels were filled with all kinds of anxiety and growth. And it's so interesting of how grateful I am for all the challenges I went through, how much I learned. And may you, in that same way, when you are caught in unexpected bardos, may you find awareness, compassion, peace, and the practices that will help you to stay awake, to remember what's most important in your life, and remember who and what you truly are. Thank you so much for your time and attention, and many, many blessings. And I look forward to being with you again.